Welcome to week 123 of Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
I'm working my way through my shirts, and this week I'm wearing what I call my E shirt, because I think E on Entourage wore this shirt once.
Oh.
We have watched episode 596 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired on Monday, December 1st, 1986. And Pearl chases Brian's car, and it is snowing. And not unexpectedly, Brian's car crashes, and he is knocked unconscious. And Pearl drags him out to some shack he finds somewhere, and tries to keep him warm until Brian can regain consciousness. While he's waiting, Pearl has some flashbacks to his various discussions with Brian and their dad. And also, actually, maybe it's Brian that has the flashbacks, because Dr. Rawlings' voice is briefly heard. And I can't remember if he's talking to Pearl or Brian. But anyway, in any case, when Brian wakes up, Pearl says, "Oh, I read all of those letters you wrote to me that were in Dr. Rawlings' files, and I know you forgave me." And then Brian kind of says, "Oh, Dr. Rawlings made me write those." Mm-hmm. And he ends up punching Pearl. So I don't know if he's just said that in the heat of the moment or if he really hasn't forgiven Pearl. Meanwhile, Alice and Courtney are waiting in the cabin to see if one or both of them will return at some point. Mm-hmm. Alice tells Courtney that Brian could read the first 20 pages of any murder mystery and know who the killer was. So I think they are going, down the path that Brian is going to figure out that Courtney killed Madeline.
Yes, I feel like that is actually not good news for Courtney, assuming she is the killer.
Mm-hmm. She didn't really... she kind of tried to shut down that line of discussion. So, but she looked a bit concerned. Mason introduces himself to Victoria. So I was right, they had not met. Of course, he knows who she is. She's a famous actress. Victoria asks Mason if he's all right, because he had just shouted at her. And he says, "Oh, there was an accident up here on the roof last year, and it really is off limits to everyone who doesn't work here." Mm-hmm. Later at the bar, she tells him that street was hypnotic, but she was not planning to jump off the roof. Mm. I guess he kind of she kind of got from his questioning. She got the feeling that he thought she was up there for that reason. Mason tells her that he doesn't think that she set out to break up Cruz and Eden on purpose. Victoria kind of says, she had long unfinished business with Cruz when she showed up back in town, and Mason seems to kind of be on her side a little bit on that. But she then tells him that she's moving back to Los Angeles. And then later, at a table, Victoria's agent shows up with the script. It's the hottest script in Hollywood, and the director personally wants Victoria to be in the movie. So it seems like this is the last of Victoria Lane. Until later in the episode. But let's take a detour to Julia, who tells Cruz that the suspect he yelled at yesterday is looking to file charges against Cruz and the city. She tells him that after David Laurent's trial, she took out her misery on everyone in town, and it looks to her like that's what Cruz is doing now. Cruz says, "If you want to help me, then stay out of my way." So Cruz is not accepting help from Julia.
We're getting a new Grumpy Cruz.
Grumpy Cruz. Santana sees Danny and Angel at the Orient Express. Danny and Angel are in a heated discussion about the fact that Danny owes Angel some money. And then eventually he tells Danny he can do a task for him tonight at midnight instead of paying him. And he'll get a bunch of drugs in exchange. So it seems like that red-eye makeup they've been putting on Danny confirms that he is addicted to something. Addicted to cocaine, I guess.
Now, we actually have a different Angel this episode. So It's not our usual Angel. It took me a minute or two to kind of piece together that this was new Angel, I guess, or temporary Angel.
They called him Angel, and then later they called him Mr. Ramirez, so we know it is the same character. And according to my notes, this Angel number 2 is just plays Angel for a few episodes, and then later Bernard White will return to the role. So this actor is David Labiosa.
Now, I don't know if we mentioned it, we did actually see Bernard White not that long ago in an old episode of Knots Landing.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, several old episodes. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that would have been around the time he was doing this or maybe just a little bit after.
Yeah, Knots Landing would have been sort of the mid-90s. What are we at? I think we're in 89 now with our Knots Landing. So yeah, we're a few years ahead. We're only a few months ahead on our Falcon Crests.
But he appeared, it's been a while since we resumed our podcast, so he actually appeared, I think, a season or two ago in Knots Landing.
Okay. So we also have been seeing some other Santa Barbara person. I keep forgetting to mention him, which is something we watched a day or two ago, and once again, I can't recall. So, oh well, we'll mention it at some point, or I'll make a note of it when we see him. Santana tells Cruz that she saw Danny with Angel, and she thinks Danny is buying drugs from Angel. Cruz brings in Danny and tells him, I can arrest you right now because you were driving and you're clearly high. They found traces of cocaine in his jacket, and Danny says, traces doesn't mean anything. He asks, what are you doing with Angel? Cruz wonders if perhaps Danny is dealing drugs for Angel. And I thought, well, maybe that's the favor that Angel is asking of Danny to take part in a drug deal at midnight. Mm-hmm. Angel is brought in, and he says, Danny's been dealing drugs. I think Santana's his supplier. So he gets both Santana and Cruz angry with him. But, of course, Danny doesn't say anything because he doesn't want to get on Angel's bad side. Basically, Angel says, you have nothing on me, and he walks out the door and waves at Cruz on his way out. Santana tells Danny that Rosa is not mad at him, just worried, and she tries to get him to come home. But he says he has something important to do. So this is referencing the favor he's agreed to do for Angel at midnight. Mm-hmm. Mason arrives and tells Cruz he's getting a lot of complaints about Cruz, and he needs to get back together with Eden. Cruz tells him not to preach to him and file a complaint if he needs to. So neither Mason nor who was it? Julia is getting through to Cruz. Back to Julia, she sends Mason a thank you note. Julia wonders if their one time together was enough. And Mason says if she didn't get pregnant, they'll just have to try again. Julia has dinner with Lionel and tells him that she could be pregnant right now, and he'll never guess in a million years who the father is. I feel like Lionel's reaction may not be as positive as Julia is thinking. And this whole episode, we get the idea that Julia's kind of giddy about everything. And I think she might be falling for Mason.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure the timing, but I believe that they were actually a couple in real life at that time.
Yeah, I don't know about the timing either.
Yeah, they're a little bit cagey about that.
Mason finds Victoria at a table, and she says she's changed her mind about moving to L.A. The script she was given had 6 nude scenes. So she is staying in Santa Barbara, and Julia sees them cozy at a table and has a concerned look on her face.
So, I had sort of wondered where they would go with Victoria's character if she didn't go to LA, because it just seemed too pat that she would. And I feel like maybe they're setting up a little bit of a love triangle.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm thinking too. Maybe with Gina as a bonus for Mason to try and seduce. Mm-hmm. He could have a very busy December, Mason. Alice calls Lionel with an update that she and Courtney are at the cabin and Pearl's there looking for Brian. Carolyn is worried for Alice, and Lionel wonders why she's so close to Alice emotionally, more so than her own daughter. What are your thoughts?
Well, I had actually always assumed that Alice was her daughter, but I don't know if that's the case or not, but they definitely have some shared history. So
Jane arrives, and Carolyn tells her that she's ended her relationship with Lionel for her. But Jane doesn't believe her. And they have another one of their fights. Carolyn tries to figure out another way to get into, Jane to understand her situation. Says that she was desperately lonely when Jane's father walked out on them. But Jane manages to twist it, as usual, and says that their dad only walked out once, but Carolyn walked out on her many times. Later, Jane answers the door, and it's a private investigator with an envelope for Caroline. Jane starts to open it, but Caroline enters the room, and so she has to confess that, a private detective came to the door. What's in this envelope? And Caroline says it's a personal matter. So I feel like Jane might be snooping for that envelope later.
I think so.
We see Caroline reading the report. One of the items in it is a newspaper article about a prisoner. And then Caroline calls the prison and asks about getting an authorization to visit. So who are you thinking that is referring to?
I don't know. I'd kind of actually missed this reference when we were watching it, so I hadn't really had a chance to think about that. We will find out what prisoner Caroline will be visiting very soon. In his car, Cruz answers an APB about a robbery in progress. He approaches the store and sees a man with a ski mask holding up a shopkeeper. The shopkeeper shouts to Cruz that the robber has a gun. The robber turns toward Cruz and Cruz shoots him. And it didn't really come together for me at first, but after a few seconds I thought, what if that was Danny? Yes, I assume it probably was.
This could this is a bad end to a bad episode for Cruz. Everyone getting down on him for his attitude, and if it is Danny or even anyone that he shot, they could be thinking, was it because of your bad mood that you shot him? I mean, from the look of it, with the shopkeeper shouting he has a gun, and later when I was writing down the credits, I watched it sort of at a quarter speed so I could get all the credits, and so I just saw the tail end of the scene, and it's clear that the person whirls around and faces Cruz, and looks like he does have a gun. So, I don't think there's any way you could say Cruz acted improperly here, based on what we saw. But who knows what the investigation might show, and if Cruz might be suspended or something until things are dealt with. But certainly, if Danny dies, Santana and Rosa and Ruben wouldn't be too happy with him.
No, that's right. And I mean, we don't know. We don't know if it's Danny at this point. And we don't know if the person who's been shot has been killed, or if we're going to have some long hospital scenes, if they're, it could be a long storyline, especially if it was Danny and he wasn't killed, and, you could have them try and turn him against Angel or something like that. You could go quite a ways with it. But definitely, if it is Danny, I think it will affect Cruz's relationship with Santana and Rosa. And I think it could also, if it seemed like it had been done improperly, then this could really raise the stakes in terms of his career with the police force.
I don't remember any of this stuff. It would have been the last week of classes for me, and then I would have been studying for finals, so maybe I was distracted. But I just can't remember anything that sort of happened in December of 86, so this will be all new to me. So it'll be interesting to see.
It's one of those things that could be a really long and important plot, or it could be fairly short. This is not Sweeps, however, right?
That's true. November Sweeps. I mean, it could be the tail end, but they probably end on a Friday, I would think. So I would think we're into December, leading into January. So next Sweeps are in February. But one wonders, why did they bring Danny back? So maybe it is to give Cruz this very negative thing to happen. Well, we'll probably find out in the next episode if it was Danny. And if so, if he's alive or not. And that is it for this episode. We had a full credits. Rosa, Sophia, and Kelly are in the credits as usual. Danny Andrade is Rupert Ravens. Angel, David Labiosa. Max is played by Matthew Tobin. I don't know who Max was. Maybe that was the guy who delivered the message to Jane. And Dr. Rawlings, Ben Piazza. So there was one voice line in Pearl's flashback or Brian's flashback of Dr. Rawlings saying a single line. So I don't know if they had him come in to record a line or if they used a line from a previous episode. Maybe they have to credit you if they do that. So I was kind of a surprise to see Dr. Rawlings in the credits. So, but presumably that doesn't mean he'll be showing up in person in the next one, because I think these daily credits, they only have to credit the people who've already appeared. So that may be the last time we see him in the credits, but it's kind of exciting. Okay, that is it for episode 596, and we'll be back tomorrow after we watch episode 597. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Well, you did seem a little strange.
I am strange, Victoria. It's a curse of the Capwells, I guess. Try as we won't, we just can't seem to be like other people. But you're still welcome to have a seat if you'd like, unless your mother told you not to talk to strange men.
Welcome back.
Hello.
This is episode 597 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara. And we've watched episode 597 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Tuesday, December 2nd, 1986. Keith is presenting a financial opportunity to the Capwells, and they seem to be thinking that might be a good deal. Mm-hmm. Gina tries to join the family in the living room, but they freeze her out and leave the room. And then Gina is angry at Keith for not sticking up for her. And Keith says that if he does a good job, he thinks the Capwells will keep him on even after Gina's 6 months is up. And so he's trying to not link himself to her too much. Yeah. Of course, Gina doesn't think that's going to happen. Then she says, the least you could do is pay attention to me and not Eden. You could do some double duty. I need you more than ever. While they're having that conversation, Cece comes up with the idea to offer $1 million to Keith if he can get Gina to break her contract through infidelity or whatever means he can devise. So they send Eden to make that offer to Keith, but Keith isn't sure he can trust Eden. And that leads me to wonder if this Eden being nice to Keith thing is actually all part of a plan on her end to try to find a way to wheedle out of that contract, and that she's just being nice to him until the 6 months is over, or they can find the tape, and that her attitude will change immensely when the time comes. Or is she really kind of becoming friends with Keith over their Victoria dislike?
I don't see her and Keith becoming a couple right now. It seems to me like they're very much in the friend zone, if that. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Eden has some sort of ulterior motive.
Yeah, I didn't really think of that until today, that, maybe she's not, warming to him at all. Mm-hmm. Angel calls Gina and demands $150,000 that she owes him. I was trying to remember what that was about. Was that from around the time that she helped him set up Santana? Was there some money owing to Angel?
That's possible, because remember, Gina did not have very much money at that point.
Maybe she already knew about her scheme to get Capwell money and promised Angel some of that.
Yeah.
Anyway, Angel seems very anxious to get it, and she says, well, you could at least have the decency to leave town if I get this for you. Mm-hmm. Keith overhears a part of their conversation. She overhears Gina saying she's going to meet him at the Orient Express, and assumes that it's someone that Gina is having an affair with, and warns her not to mess up this deal for them. So Gina decides she'll try to get the money from Cece, tries to bluff bluff her way through saying, oh, you're supposed to support me however I need, etc. And then in the end, she kind of has to tap dance for the money, and Cece comes up with the idea of just giving her $150,000 in exchange for 1 month off the contract. And Gina, although she tries to bend Cece's offer a little bit, she ends up getting stuck with the contract now being for only 5 months.
Yeah.
And when Sophia hears this, she is ecstatic. Cruz pulls the ski mask off the robber that he's just shot, and it's Danny Andrade.
Yeah.
But he is alive. At the hospital, Santana blames Cruz for having too quick of a reaction. He doesn't even get a chance to tell her that the robber had a mask and that he didn't know it was Danny. Rosa, of course, immediately is on Cruz's side and says, well, what about the duty of a daughter or a mother? So Danny apologizes to Cruz when Cruz visits him in his room. And Cruz suspects that Danny has been smoking crack. And Danny said, well, it started as cocaine and moved to crack. But whatever I took today just hit me a lot harder than ever before. And I was really out of it. So hopefully Danny will survive this. He's, conscious. And, they've got to operate on the bullet. And it's near his spine. So usually in a soap opera, that means someone's going to be in a wheelchair for a while. So we'll see how that goes. Cruz says that Angel will pay. Mason tells Cruz he should go on leave and that someone else should go after Angel. Gina calls Cruz and says, Angel's going to be at the Orient Express at 11 p.m. Gina has possibly wheedled out of a way of paying Angel and also keeping that $150,000 for herself. But please do not tell him that this tip came from me, says Gina.
I feel like Cruz might be in trouble if he goes too hard at Angel, because I think he's already on a bit of thin ice professionally with the way he's been acting lately.
Pearl and Brian are not in a shack after all. It's become clear now that they are in a mine, a disused mine.
I was trying to figure out how they got there.
Well, he had dragged Brian off the road, after the car accident, and it was kind of snowy, so I guess he thought some shelter would be helpful. But it must be very close to the street, I would think. But we see that it's now, I think, raining, unless it's just a very bad VHS copy. But we see what looks like rain dripping, pouring down some of the beams that are holding the mine up. So either that or it's just a very smeary VHS and it's actually just dust or dirt crumbling around the beams. But either way, of course, in a soap opera, that means something's going to collapse at some point. So Pearl and Brian are in a mine. Brian says that when he escaped from the church basement, he had returned home only to hear Michael tell their parents and Dr. Rawlings that the family would be better off without an embarrassment like Brian. And we actually hear Dr. Rawlings' voice again this time. Definitely new dialogue recorded by Ben Piazza for this conversation with Michael's parents, who we also hear voiced by two actors, presumably that we'll never see, because it was a voiceover flashback. Pearl says that if Brian had stayed, he would have realized that Pearl was being sarcastic, and that was the day that he left home forever and became Pearl and threw Michael away. Pearl protects Brian when the ceiling starts to cave in, and after they both dust themselves off, Brian jumps on Pearl to save him from the next cave-in. But Pearl is injured and can't walk. So we see Brian trying to drag Pearl around looking for an exit. There was a shaft of light at one point that they were heading towards, but after that second cave-in, I think they had to redirect. It was nighttime when the car accident happened, so I don't know where that light's coming from, unless it's already morning.
Yeah, you'd think a cave would be very dark, so it feels like there must be some light coming in somehow.
I feel like they were very close to the mouth of the cave to begin with, so... and yeah, it's nighttime in Santa Barbara, which is in the same time zone, right? Because Danny was shot at 11. Actually, wasn't Danny's thing supposed to be at midnight? But then now Angel's meeting Gina at 11? I don't know. Somehow time's going back 2 hours. As Brian is dragging Pearl around looking for a way out, Brian says it's too late for them to be a family, because that's what Pearl is saying, that, having left his family forever back then, he and Brian should stick together. I think it's going to be, Brian's going to forgive Pearl now that Brian is rescuing Pearl and having to pull him out. But makes me wonder if Pearl's going to end up in a wheelchair after, if he's not able to walk after that collapse. So everything will be happy until Brian figures out Courtney killed her sister, I guess.
Wouldn't it be fun if Pearl ended up in a wheelchair and we almost had like a misery situation with Courtney?
Oh, that would be fun. And then Brian has to save him from that, too, when she goes nuts. That could be. And then Pearl's happiness will be short-lived when Kelly comes back. And she goes, "Oh, Pearl, are you still in town?" Eden tries to comfort Cruz over, what Santana said to him. But he says he doesn't have time because, of course, he just got that call from Gina. But somehow he still manages to hang around the hospital a lot longer than you'd think. I think he did say he still had some time before 11. But if I were him, I'd get over there right away. Cruz tells Mason that Angel will be at the Orient Express at 11. And Mason decides that it would be better if he apprehended Angel before Cruz got his hands on him. Angel arrives early at the restaurant, and even though he's early, he calls the Capwell house to see where Gina is, and Gina answers and quickly pretends to be Rosa and puts on a Spanish accent and takes a chance to make some digs at Rosa, who served that horrible Thanksgiving dinner for the family just the other day. Angel seems to buy it and just has a drink while waiting for his windfall. Cruz gets there just after Mason does, and Cruz is like, "Are you playing games with me?" And Mason reiterates he doesn't think Cruz is the one who should be taking in Angel. So Mason goes over to the bar where Angel is a little tipsy and says, "We're taking you in on the questioning in the shooting of Danny Andrade," to which Angel replies, "I don't even know Danny," which is kind of funny since they spent the whole last episode in the police station together. We see a service elevator, I think for the first time, in the Capwell Hotel. I'm not sure if it's one of the two elevators that we normally see when we see that presidential suite floor, or if it's a new elevator. But it's got a room service card inside it, and there's a laundry cart just outside it. And as Mason pushes the button, Angel pulls a used bottle of champagne off that cart and knocks Mason unconscious. He comes to on the floor just as Cruz opens the elevator to find out, what happened to them. And Angel is nowhere to be found. So what will Angel do? He's going to still want his $150,000. He probably suspects Gina set him up. I think he might head for that Capwell house to try and extract that cash out of Gina.
Yeah, I think Gina might be in trouble here.
She'll either accidentally open the door to him thinking it's some good news, or he'll sneak into the house somehow. But I don't know if this is going to lead to some big hostage thing, or this will just be a give me the money, I'm heading out of town thing. Or there may be some threat to Gina until she can get that cash. But the fact is, Cece's said he'd give it to her. And, he said he was going to have Mason come and sign the contract. So maybe she'll have to hide Angel in the tunnel next to the study until all that signing is done and she can get the cash. Well, that is it for our Tuesday episode.
We did have a sighting this last week of a Santa Barbara alumni, and it was Haley. Yeah,
we were watching yesterday, right? Yesterday was Tuesday. We watched TV 101. Yeah, TV 101. We're on episode 2. And Haley was there as the brother of a character who died in episode 1. Sorry,
I think she was the sister.
Well, she was the sister. So that was TV 101, started in late 1988. So that is 2 years from the Santa Barbara episodes that we have. And I don't remember if Haley was still on the show or not at that time.
It's kind of interesting, though, in Santa Barbara, she's very much kind of a teenager. And in this episode of TV 101, she seemed to be sort of the older, more mature sister. So.
Mm-hmm. She had a different hairdo, too.
Yeah.
All right, we'll be back for the Wednesday episode 598 of Santa Barbara. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
This is episode 598 of Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara, and we have watched the Wednesday, December 3rd, 1986 episode. Pearl tells Courtney and Alice that he had explained what had happened to Brian, but Brian doesn't care. Alice tells Brian she loves him, and he tells her to forget about him and go back to Santa Barbara. Pearl's got some bruised ribs in this scene. He spends the day recovering, but I think is anxious to go back to Santa Barbara too. Mm-hmm. Julia is very giddy to see Mason and worries that she's overstepping their agreement because she actually kind of purposely went to the Orient Express in hopes of running into him at breakfast. He tells her that she can count on him during the pregnancy and then orders a glass of milk for her. He spots Victoria, and Julia says, "Oh, it's okay if you go sit by her." Mm-hmm. Victoria tells Mason she needs to go away for a while before returning to Santa Barbara, and Mason takes her to the nunnery, where he was stalking Mary, and introduces her to Mother Isabel. This is one of several times we've seen Mother Isabel over the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. Played by Priscilla Murill, who played Lou Grant's wife on on Mary Tyler Moore. And he shows Victoria the mural that he had painted of himself and Mary. Victoria tells him about a movie she was in that took place in a convent. And before Mason leaves, Victoria figures out that Mary is the person who had died on the roof of the Capwell Hotel.
We're really seeing them try and pull or push Mason and Victoria together, I feel like, in this episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they're telegraphing their intentions of a triangle between Julia and Victoria here.
Yeah, and you know, really there's a lot of things running parallel at this point, which there weren't at all before, where we have the Capwell sign, which sort of is how Mason and Victoria meet, mm-hmm. and then the whole thing with the nunnery, and that they show a little scene from Victoria's movie where she's playing a nun, so they're really playing this up.
Mm-hmm. Mason says to Mother Isabel that Victoria is nothing like Mary, but Mother Isabel says that she sees something in Victoria that's similar to Mary. The NBC television network is experiencing video difficulties. Please stand by. Now, this didn't last for very long, but somehow I feel like we missed a brief scene with Ted and Haley and Gina that mm-hmm. I will talk about when we get to them. But first, Cruz spies on Gina, hoping to catch her talking to Angel. Ted and Haley arrive for breakfast with Gina, and my theory is that in the missed scene, Gina invites them to move into the mansion, because that's what they're discussing when we see a new scene start. Angel surprises Gina and Haley in the study. He suspects that Gina is the one who ratted him out to Cruz, but Gina says, "Why would I spend all this time gathering your money if I thought you were going to be hauled off to prison last night?" Gina says she only got the $50,000 that Angel said he needed at first, but now he wants the whole $150,000. And Gina hides Angel in the tunnels. Angel then is unable to leave the tunnels because Mason comes back home with a VHS tape of Victoria Lane in The Cathedral Murders and decides to watch it in the study. So Angel's kind of trapped there for a couple hours, I think. Mm-hmm. At the hospital, the doctor tells Eden that Danny might not be able to walk after the operation. something that Danny has said that he's a bit worried about. Ted and Haley visit Danny at the hospital, and Ted says, "I feel like the Danny I used to know is somebody else." Now, I'm really happy for this scene because, first of all, we haven't seen Ted and Danny interact this whole time Danny's been back.
No, in fact, I don't even know if we saw them interact the last time Danny came back.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, just a couple of brief days at the police station last time. And then, I was kind of lamenting how Danny's not the same happy-go-lucky Danny we knew at the beginning, and Ted basically says the same thing. So, nice of them to spell it out. I think Danny... Did Danny actually talk about potentially ending up in a wheelchair? Because I think I had mentioned that last time as a potential direction they might be going with this. Cruz tells Haley and Ted that Angel is the one who got Danny hooked on the drugs, and this worries Haley, and she gets worried for Gina's safety. She waits until Cruz is gone, but then tells Ted that Angel is in the tunnel behind the bookcase in the Capwell study. So this leads to Ted being, angry with Haley for keeping that from him. And I think he mentions in this episode that their marriage is not going well.
No, we could tell.
Ted opens the door to the bookcase, and when Angel comes out, Ted grabs him. But Angel pulls a knife and jumps out the window just as Cruz arrives. Cruz runs out the window also after Angel. Then we see a uniformed officer at the front door telling Eden that the pair was last spotted running towards the Montecito powerhouse. Oh, I should look up and see if that's an actual place and if it's anywhere near. Is it Park Lane they live on? At the powerhouse, which reminded me a little bit of the Marine World, pump house or whatever, where Eden was trying to hide from Kirk. Earlier this year.
It's got a big staircase, just like it.
I don't think on location. I think this is a set, but maybe I'm wrong. At the powerhouse, Cruz gets the drop on Angel, gets him to drop the knife, and then tells him to get on his knees. And the last line of the show is Angel saying, "Don't shoot me, Cruz!" So I don't know what will stop Cruz from shooting Angel. Will it be Cruz himself? Will Eden come in to talk Cruz out of making a terrible mistake? I feel like a couple of times Eden has tried to sort of engage Cruz in the last couple episodes and ended up not going well. Oh, and that's it for this Wednesday episode. Anything else you had? Any predictions for where things are going?
No predictions, and I don't remember us seeing any guest stars on any shows between the last episode and this one.
No, but we actually only recorded this a day after the last one, so maybe we'll get some episodes out. I don't know how long Victoria's going to be in that convent, and if Mason will be visiting her there, or if it's going to be Mason and Julia for a couple of weeks before Victoria returns, and maybe throws a wrench into that. We'll see. And presumably Angel is caught one way or the other in this next episode. And what else are we waiting for? Oh yeah, just Gina and Keith and Kelly in the 5-month contract. So we'll see how that moves forward. And we'll see if Brian follows Pearl and Alice and Courtney back to Santa Barbara to try to become a family with his brother. All right, we'll be back after we've watched the Thursday episode, number 599. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Cruz!
Where's he off in such a hurry?
I don't know. Probably driven away by the new lady of the house.
Did you have to say that?
I'm sorry. It just seems like the closer we get to this thing, the more it seems like a bad idea.
It's breakfast, Ted. Just breakfast.
It's never just anything with Gina, Haley.
Okay, you're right. You can look for the poison in the orange juice.
Welcome back.
Hello.
This is episode 599 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara. We have nothing planned for 600, unfortunately. Victoria realizes that Mary is the woman that Mason was talking about that was killed on the roof of the Capwell Hotel. And Mason says, 1 hour in a convent and you're omniscient. And Victoria then apologizes. Mason actually says that's all right. After some more banter, Mason leaves the convent, leaving Victoria there. For how long? We don't know. And on his drive home, Mason starts thinking about Mary, and then Victoria, and then Mary and Victoria. So I think maybe he's agreeing with Mother Isabel that there is some innate similarity between Mary and Victoria. Not that necessarily Mason only needs to date people who remind him of Mary. Julia invites Mason to dinner. And then he says, oh, I hope that's not overstepping the bounds of our contract, which makes her really angry, and she storms out. Mason phones Victoria and asks if he can drive up to visit her tomorrow and bring some books that he has found for her. So I feel like Julia's getting jealous already.
I think so, and I think we've got a nice little love triangle brewing here.
And if Julia's pregnant, that may give her the one up on it, but of course...
Give her an edge, yeah.
In the Montecito powerhouse, Angel begs Cruz not to shoot him, calling him brother, and trying to remind him that, he knew Angel's parents, and they're part of the same community, and Cruz says that he no longer considers Angel any kind of brother to him. But as we expected, or I did, Eden shows up, and Cruz tries to get her to leave, but she ends up talking him into just arresting Angel and not killing him. Although none of that was really overtly stated, but...
No, but she does tell him she's very disappointed in him, so I think she suspects he might have gone over the line if she hadn't come.
Cut to an old man at the powerhouse that I don't think we've ever seen before. And Cruz asks him for a leave of absence. So I feel like this might be the police commissioner or something. I don't know if we've ever even seen the role of police commissioner before. Although I feel like when there was all those shenanigans with the job changing between Keith and Mason, and then Cruz's job was changing too or something. I feel like there may have been some kind of higher up, but I don't remember him looking like this guy. He had told Cruz to take the rest of the day off, and Cruz was like, I'm going to need a longer time. So Eden asks Mason to talk Cruz out of staying, away from his job and to come back. But Mason tells her not to blow it. Cruz needs the time to realize that he needs to come back to Eden. Later, Cruz returns to the powerhouse, and Eden is already there, saying, "Ha, I knew you'd come here." Eden tries to get Cruz to agree that they have a future together. Instead, Cruz leaves the powerhouse. So Angel is apprehended. Don't know if that means he'll be around anymore, or if he's off to the big house.
Wasn't Cruz originally in this funk because he didn't have a future with Eden, and now he doesn't want a future with Eden? It seems...
I guess he doesn't want to go around in circles with her. Although, guess what? You got 8 years of that ahead of you.
Just seems contradictory to me.
Carolyn tells Lionel and Jane that she needs to run out and get Alice's birthday present. Carolyn instead visits Gus Jackson, Alice's father, at Chino Prison. They talk about Alice. Their daughter! Did you see that coming?
Yes, I think I mentioned it in a previous podcast.
Exactly. I, of course, remembered it from before, and was just waiting for Gus to finally show up after all these months. It seems like storyline-wise, this is suddenly ramped up. Santa Barbara seems to do that. Like, they dance around something for weeks and weeks and weeks. And suddenly in one episode, boom, some guy just says, "How's my daughter and yours, Alice?" He reveals that after he last saw Carolyn, he quit being a boxer. Oh, that's interesting. I don't think we knew that before. I mean, I remembered it, so... Not sure if it was mentioned before. And took odd jobs to support him and Alice. Carolyn said that Alice needed her mother, but Gus says that she didn't need to see Carolyn's string of boyfriends. So that kind of explains how Gus ended up being, the sole caretaker of Alice, and presumably this thing of Carolyn's housekeeper being her father is just a story or being her mother is just a story they cooked up at some point, or Carolyn cooked up at some point. And then Carolyn asks, well, why are you in prison? So that's interesting. She didn't really know that he was in prison, so I'm not sure why she was phoning around the prisons. I guess that private investigator that she sent to find Gus, right? So this actually makes me think of that last conversation she had with Cece. Like, I feel like Cece knows about Gus. And then he tells her the tale of that police officer that we've seen in Alice's flashbacks, and he confirms that this officer took a liking to young Alice and molested her, and Gus and him struggled at one point, and the police officer's gun went off, but didn't kill the police officer, as I had thought, but he was injured, and the officer ended up framing Gus and sending him to prison. And then the judge, on top of that, ordered Gus to have no contact with Alice. So this kind of explains how Alice ended up in that system. And he says that he had gotten some letters from Alice at the start, but once Dr. Rawlings became involved in her care, he lost all contact with Alice. So
now I'm wondering if at some point down the road we might see this corrupt police officer.
Yeah. My assumption had been that he was dead this whole time, so this could be something. Now, Gus had mentioned that he'd come up for parole a couple times, and I think he said he didn't bother. So I'm wondering if his next parole comes up, he, after having spent all this time in prison, may be showing up in Santa Barbara if things go well.
Yeah. Shake things up a bit.
I mean, Carolyn might even ask Cece to put in a good word for him if that happens. However, Carolyn does not reveal to Gus that she is living with Alice. So I feel like the fact that she's keeping this a secret, which I think Cece knows, she doesn't want everyone to really know that Alice is her daughter. And probably having Gus show up is not something else Carolyn would want. So maybe she would try to stop his parole. I don't know how deep that goes.
Let's see.
That is it for that visit. Ted and Haley have an awkward morning as they get ready for Alice's birthday party. Haley asks Ted if he wants a divorce. Julia arrives at the Lockridge house for Alice's party. She is giddy at the thought that she might be pregnant, and Lionel talks with her about that time Augusta was pregnant with Warren. Brian phones the Lockridge house, but hangs up when Pearl answers. Jane is annoyed with Carolyn for taking so long to return to the party, and assumes that Carolyn was off with another man. When her story about going to the mall seems a bit far-fetched, considering I don't know how far away Chino is from Santa Barbara, but it might be a bit of a drive. Jane tells Lionel that Carolyn slipped off to see her new man. Pearl gives a toast to Alice, and Alice thanks everyone and gives a toast herself to the newlyweds, Ted and Haley, who stand there awkwardly while everyone toasts their marriage.
Yeah, I'd forgotten that in Santa Barbara time they've really only just gotten married, and they already hate each other. So it'll be interesting to see if they do get a divorce, because I can't see the relationship being sustainable unless they have a change of heart. But, as it's mentioned in this episode, that's going to put them in legal jeopardy.
Because they had agreed to stay married for a year, and I think, Mason's the DA now. Can't he just say, we've closed the case on...
Yeah, you would think so.
...the bombing? But then there's Brick, right? Not only would he really be against that, but he actually knows, for sure that it was Haley. So I don't think Brick would let Mason just close the case. But we haven't seen Brick in a while. I feel like there may be a episode where he storms into Mason's office saying, "What's going on with my wife's murder?"
Yeah.
Brian calls again and wishes Alice a happy birthday. And she's quite giddy to get that call. And he's, kind of reminiscent about old times on the phone. And things are going well until Pearl picks up the phone and Brian hangs up on him. At least that's how I remember it. After the party, Lionel answers the phone. And it's the guard at Chino Prison calling to tell Carolyn that she dropped her purse at the prison. Tell her to call 555-3214 and ask for Robin. I think the name was Robin. That's kind of a fun name. When Lionel gives Carolyn the message, he doesn't let on that the call came from a prison. Just, wherever you were today, they said you left your purse. And she tells him it was a dress shop.
Mm-hmm. So he knows now that she is hiding something.
Mm-hmm. So, when, Lionel's pretty easygoing about stuff, I wonder how he will try to get this information about what's going on at that prison and who Carolyn visited. Will Lionel be the one who helps Gus get out of prison? Because,
I feel like he's going to do a little bit of investigating on his own.
Yeah, if he finds out that Gus is Alice's father, and that he's got a parole hearing coming up, I think he will facilitate that release. So that could be, he might do that without ever learning Alice is Carolyn's daughter, and then Gus showing up at the door may be the thing that inadvertently reveals that.
Yeah.
Okay, I will find out how long it takes to get from Montecito to Chino in time for our 600th episode coming up tomorrow, and it's kind of a unexpectedly rainy day in Vancouver today, with the added bonus that there's a seniors home on fire across the bay, so or the inlet. So hopefully tomorrow it'll be sunny and we can find a nice place to do our podcast from. There's a big sulfur pile across the inlet too, but I don't know if they'll let us do our podcast from there. So.
I feel like that's not the ideal podcast location.
All right, we will see you after we watch episode 600. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Welcome to episode 600 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
We have climbed up to the top of Queen Elizabeth Park and are sitting next to the Bloedel Conservatory. And I found one yellow balloon, which is my most favorite color, which is nice because today is Mother's Day too. So this is our big high production values for our 600th episode. And last night we watched episode 600. And it was kind of a dull one. My summaries were actually quite small for each of the storylines. The first of which is, of course, Cruz and Eden. Each of them receives a bouquet of flowers with a note that says, "Remember." So it's clear to the viewer right away that they didn't send these to each other. But both of them think they are from the other. And these flowers happen to be the flowers that were growing in the countryside, presumably in France, when Cruz and Eden first made love on the Orient Express. So I think we had known they had been on the Orient Express together, but I don't know if we knew that was where they made love, and I don't know if that's before or after this thing where he was the gardener at this place she was staying. And of course we all remember that Marcello hypnotized Eden on the Orient Express to forget that she had run into her dead mother. So I am wondering if this was the same trip. And what else did Eden forget? So that's something that maybe in the future, when we revisit the Orient Express trip, we will figure out if this is the same trip or not.
But we know from the details that this has to be, we know it's not Cruz and Eden sending these flowers to each other. So we know it has to be someone close to them.
I thought
who knows about this
I had
trip.
guessed it was Sophia. So Cruz, of course, is angry with Eden for sending him these flowers. And Eden, of course, is hopeful for Cruz having sent her these flowers. So they meet at the Orient Express to discuss it, and they soon realize someone else had sent the flowers. And Cruz leaves annoyed. And when Eden gets home, there is a letter to her from the Mystery Flower Center It is, in fact, Kelly Capwell, who has made all these arrangements from Europe. So I figured I mean, the only other suspect was Pearl, but I thought, did he know all that stuff about the flowers? So that's a good way to remind us that Kelly Capwell is still around. Mason and Julia meet at the Orient Express, and Julia's reading a baby names book, and Mason says, oh, you know what we were going to name our baby when Mary was pregnant? We had Matthew for a boy and Emily for a girl. So I strongly suspect neither of these names will be used if Julia is pregnant. Do you think Julia will have a boy or a girl?
Well, we don't even actually know if she's pregnant yet.
All right. Do you think Victoria will have a boy or a girl? We're looking very far into the future for a relationship that's only just started. Mason and Victoria. Mason goes to visit the convent, of course, today to bring Victoria those books. Mother Isabel actually walks into the chapel before Mason gets there, sees Victoria in a pew, and thinks of Mary for a second. So I think she and Mason are both seeing a bit of Mary in Victoria. And Mother Isabel tells Mason, oh, it's very, very dangerous for you to try and see Mary and Victoria.
I felt like that was perhaps a little bit of foreshadowing for something in the future.
And Mason does tell Victoria that whatever she may have done to, split Cruz and Eden apart, those cracks were already in the relationship before Victoria returned. So, Brian shows up at Pearl's apartment, and Pearl doesn't let him see the fake. Pearl only lets him see the fake part of the apartment, the Pearl side. I think it would enrage him if he saw the Michael side.
Yeah.
But in any event, they have their usual argument, Pearl, and then Pearl can't convince him to become his brother again, and Brian walks off.
It's really nice to see Kelsey Kaur in this really early role, because of all the people who were in Santa Barbara, apart from Robin Wright, he probably has had the largest career post Santa Barbara, so it's quite nice to see him.
Lionel reveals to Carolyn that he knows that note that she got wasn't from the dress shop, it was from the prison, but she says she's not ready to tell him why she's gone to visit someone at a prison. And he seems okay with that. They have a little hug. Carolyn returns to the prison to pick up the purse that she left there and has another visit with Gus and admits to him that she lied yesterday when she said she didn't know where Alice was. So she gets a Polaroid photo of Alice out of her purse and gives it to Gus via a couple of guards in between. So that was nice. And Gus seems to have kind of softened a bit to Carolyn in this one intervening day. And also Carolyn says, I know some people in Santa Barbara, I'm going to have them look at your parole. And he's very grateful for that. So I think Gus might be showing up at the Lockridge doorstep a lot faster than we originally theorized. Then Carolyn asks for a private talk with Alice, which annoys Jane, of course. And she starts to talk to Alice about a man that left her life but is now back. And Alice, for some reason, can't figure out who it is, even though it's a very long conversation. And then the doorbell rings before Carolyn can tell Alice about Gus, and it's Brian at the door. And she goes, oh, it was Brian you were talking about. And before Carolyn can say anything, Brian takes Alice into the garden.
Now, you always know in these kind of storylines that if someone's sitting down to have a private, important conversation, they will either be interrupted or someone will be listening behind the curtain. And in this case, it was an interruption.
In the garden, Alice thinks that Brian returning is a sign that he's going to stay in Santa Barbara. But he ends up stalking off, just like he did with Pearl. So it's going to take them longer to convince Brian to stay in Santa Barbara than it will take Carolyn to get Gus out of prison, I think. Brian just says, I'm not sure. Well, that's better than a no, I guess.
Yeah, actually, a lot of our couples are kind of striking out this episode.
And I find out how long it takes to get to Chino Men's Prison from Park Lane in Montecito. It's a 2-hour and 53-minute drive. So between the time they were preparing for Alice's birthday yesterday And the time Carolyn returned from her quick errand to the mall, she was gone for at least 6 hours. So I can see why Jane was a little annoyed by that. All right, and that is it for episode 600 of Santa Barbara, and that's it for week, what are we on, 123, something like that? So we'll be back Monday with a new set of 5 episodes as we start episode 601. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
So what did you expect? What's the matter with you? You expected this to be Camelot?